Hey, what's up, guys? Tyler here with Secureteam. Well, today is a very exciting day. For around 5 years now, the Secureteam channel has had the pleasure of bringing you the alternative news of the day and attempted, at least, to answer some of the most pressing questions facing us as a community. The alien cover-up truly is the most fascinating and addictive subject matter you'll likely ever come across. And today, in continuance of that search for truth, it is with great honor that for the first time in the history of the channel, we hold an interview with a pioneer of the ufology movement whose work has spanned decades. Today, we welcome the man, the myth, the legend, Dr. Stephen Greer.
Thank you. I'm very pleased to be with you.
Well, thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule, and I want to congratulate you on the release and success of your film Unacknowledged and the endless work that you've been putting in over the years.
You're welcome. It's a labor of love, I assure you.
It certainly is. Now, we don't have a whole lot of time today, so I want to make every minute count. We have a lot of questions that have been submitted by viewers. I have some of my own, and of course, we want to talk about the new film. So I think the best way to start, and for those who may be new to the topic and your work, could you briefly tell the viewers a little bit about your background, what it was that originally drew you to this research and led to your founding of CSETI and the Disclosure Project?
Well, I'm an emergency doctor, ER trauma. Before that, I was a meditation teacher, went all over the world teaching people Vedic Sanskrit meditation. And when I was a child, I had a sighting of one of these UFOs. It was about 1963, before any of you guys were alive. And it was a very clear day, crystal clear in North Carolina and Charlotte, where I grew up. And it ignited, it was so close and so clear. It's this seamless, disc-shaped object, beautiful. And the boys and I who saw it, my twin sister remembers this as well, were struck that this was definitely nothing we had. And so it ignited an interest in this from childhood, actually. So in 1990, I started a project to make open contact with these civilizations as a diplomatic mission called the Center for the Study of Extraterrestrial Intelligence. It's now all under the umbrella of SiriusDisclosure.com, which I think is right here, you can see, and SIRIUS Disclosure.com. And SiriusDisclosure.com has within it the Disclosure Project and CSETI, and also the Orion Project, which is what we're looking into, the new energy systems. But what really got me fully involved is in 1990, after starting this project, we were out on a beach and actually had a contact event happen where we were able to vector in using the protocols that we have for ET craft on a beach in Florida. This made its way onto the front page of the Pensacola paper. And then within a month, the intelligence community, let's just call them the IC for short, various members from various three-letter agencies contacted me and said, first of all, what the fuck are you doing? Excuse my language, but that's literally what they said. And you know, who do you think you are? And I said, well, I'm just a doctor who is interested in contact with these civilizations, and we're going to do this, and there's nothing you can do about it. So the head of Army Intelligence got very angry at me. And this is when I began to realize that I'd hit a real nerve. So about a little over a year later, I was up in Washington being asked to brief the head of the CIA. And between 1992 and 1997, I realized that the president and the CIA director were being deliberately fooled on a lot of issues. And the biggest one is the UFO issue. They weren't getting the answers they were looking for. They were being lied to. There was a complete breakdown in our constitutional government. And I concluded that I was going to have to do something to fix this. So I started something called Project Starlight. Project Starlight was the early predecessor to the now known Global Disclosure Project movement. And this was when we were putting together briefings for the president, CIA director, members of Congress, et cetera, and so on. And so between 93 and 97, we held countless briefings in the U.S. and around the world, the UN Secretary General as well, Boutros Boutros-Ghali. And there was widespread support for ending the secrecy. However, the leaders didn't have you, and you'll see in the movie Unacknowledged, which has just come out this week, the leaders didn't have the courage to do it. And one of Bill Clinton's good friends came to my home and said, we're concerned he will end up like Jack Kennedy. And I thought he was joking. And he said, no, we're not joking. And, but we think you can do it. And I said, oh, well, you think I can do it because I'm not important and I'm expendable. If they kill me, it doesn't matter. And he looked me straight in the eye and he says, yes, you're expendable. So my joke in the inner circle of my followers is that I'm the throwaway guy. I'm the guy, it doesn't matter if you give up your career, your life. So, you know, these cowards in Washington and the politicians and the lawyers and the fat cats and the global elites, who are all fascists, by the way, they don't want to rock the boat, because what I discovered was that a big part of the plan, there are two big agendas here. One is the false disclosure that's going on right now. And that's where people are putting out nonsensical information to scare people, to prepare the populace for interplanetary war. That's about 99%. That's 99% of ufology, I guarantee. 100%. I know it for a fact. So number two is they don't want people to know about these technologies because, hey, you know, if it's known how these UFOs are moving around, and they know, and people find out about zero-point energy and anti-gravity, they're not going to be happy spending thousands of dollars a year per household on heating oil and on gas and coal and destroying the biosphere. So they are trying to maintain the status quo of the global power elite. And that's really what it's about. And that is all based on the energy system we use and the infrastructure we have, which is from the 1800s, by the way. So when I discovered that, I didn't really understand until I began in the, I guess about 20 to 25 years ago, I began to connect these dots of why is this subject this secret? Why would they kill a president or Marilyn Monroe or threaten to kill me and have killed people on my team to keep this secret? Well, the reason is because they're protecting, you know, several $100 trillion in public utilities and oil and gas and coal and nuclear power and all these things that are destroying the planet. And these people want to maintain their position on the top of that pyramid, where they're in control of the global economy and the systems that go with it. So it then made sense why it was secret. And actually, this was the first question the CIA director had for me. Why are they lying to me, the CIA director, and why are they lying to the president? And I said, well, sir, the reason they don't want you to know is that this president is disposed favorably to end the secrecy. But if he ends the secrecy, it throws a monkey wrench in their plans to squeeze as much out of the global economy as they can with the fossil fuel industries and the petrodollar system. And moreover, they have another plan, and that is they want to keep it secret until they can play the ultimate trump card, no pun intended, of a false alien invasion. And they've been getting their ducks in a row and building man-made UFOs for decades and staging things like abductions. By the way, I personally know many guys who've been on the squads who go around doing abductions. And of course, the ufologists, who for the most part, unfortunately, don't have any good sources in the intelligence community, think that these are being done by, quote, aliens. I go, yeah, they're aliens, but they're man-made aliens. And interestingly, we finally got one of these intelligence officers to go on the record in the film and in the book, Unacknowledged. And by the way, if you're interested in the subject, the book, which is this thing, this has about 10 times more information than the movie, which is now #1 on iTunes. So I concluded that we had to do something to get the word out. And when I realized that the cowards in Washington wouldn't do it, I said, well, we have to do it. So we did the Disclosure Project National Press Club event in 2001, and have been working, ardently ever since to build a community of people around the world of kind of grassroots. And this is why your group is so important to this process, is that it's the people who are going to have to rise up and demand disclosure. And not only demand it, but do it. We got to do it. We got to be the folks who actually do it. So that's kind of that's the answer, believe it or not, to how all this has happened. That's what's brought us here to 2017.
Right, right.
So.
Well, I don't pretend to, know half as much as you do. I don't have the experience. I was still in diapers when you were doing most of this stuff. But,
Yep.
most of us out there, we're learning. We are trying to figure out the truth here. And in the 5 years that I've been running the channel, it's been an amazing thing to see the fact that we're reaching millions of people every week. We're getting 2,000 new subscribers a day, and a lot of these people are new to the subject. They have just become interested in it. And as you were talking earlier, I wanted to bring up that 2001 event. That was a very special year for you, because that was the date that you held the famous National Press Club event, the most watched National Press Club event ever, I might add, where you brought together what I could describe as a dream team of military, intelligence, government, corporate, scientific witnesses who, by all counts, blew the lid off of the alien cover-up. And I wanted to know if you could tell us what that day was like for you, how it was that you got these witnesses to come forward, all of which I'm sure were under an immense amount of pressure, and how you think that day changed the field of ufology as we know it, from mere folklore to a very real and confirmed phenomenon. Can you hear me? Can you see me now?
I'm not seeing you, but
there we go. Well, I wasn't sure if you were having any connection issues.
We're good.
Okay.
No, it was a power outage that interrupted the call. That's all.
Okay.
So we can continue.
Okay. So we were speaking.
So you were asking me what it was like, right?
Was that day a triumph for you? And, did you experience, I guess you could say, blowback after that day from some dark places, if you will?
Well, the 2001 event was a milestone, but it was really a mid-milestone between now and when I first started in the early 90s, in the sense that it was when we made the decision to bypass the government on this and do it ourselves as a people's initiative. And that was a turning point, because and let me tell you how we got there. That day was, of course, very stressful. As you know, the entire first hour of the National Press Club event was electronically jammed by the National Security Agency. No signal was allowed to leave the National Press Club building. Many people don't know that. That is a fact. They panicked when they saw, and I know that Bill Gates and Larry Ellison of Oracle and Bill Gates of Microsoft were watching. We used up what back then were called T1 lines, every T1 line in the city. And the number of people trying to watch it was enormous. So what they did is that they blocked the signals. And I had a security team that was out that previous night scoping out the building for me. I have a lot of volunteer special forces people who support this work. One reason I'm still alive. And those guys saw people up on the roof of the building putting up the electronics to jam the signal going out. So what happened is, about an hour later, it got back online, but then a lot of people had dropped off because they were waiting for an hour. The news media, there were 22 network media cameras there, and it was covered all over the world. But as you now know, if you looked at the movie Unacknowledged, and I gather you have, the big mainstream media have people in their national security reporters and military reporters whose job it is to bring, to basically kill these sort of stories. So there were people in the intelligence community began calling all the major networks and saying, take this down. Now, I have contacts at CNN and ABC, who I don't want to name, who personally told me that happened. So it got taken down. Now, this is the beauty now of the internet. With things like this and Facebook and Twitter, there are things that didn't exist in 2001, that's 16 years ago, that exist today. But we were very vulnerable to this kind of media manipulation. But still, we estimate around the world, around 800 million people heard about it. That includes Pravda, the Chinese news agency, reported it. CNN International reported it extensively, but it got taken down off CNN domestic almost immediately. It was up very briefly. So what I learned from that is I was kind of beta testing the system, let's call it, to see what the intelligence community and corporations, the fascist corporations that control the media, what they would do when we pulled off an event like this. And we found out what they would do. And that is that system is completely embedded with the intelligence community. And now we have, in the movie Unacknowledged, a constitutional attorney, Daniel Sheehan, and an Air Force Office of Special Investigations senior officer who worked the UFO issue for 9 years as a counterintelligence disinformation agent, admitting that he carried, quote, bags of cash to the media. So everyone listening needs to understand that if you look at this movie and read the book, which has even more detail, you're going to be astounded at the firsthand accounts of people who have seen that what we call our press freedoms and the so-called fourth estate in a democracy, is actually a joke when it comes to this issue, and that it's very controlled and it's very manipulated. So then we decided, well, we're going to have to develop more grassroots strategies. And luckily, the internet and communications across the internet and shows like your own often will have more people watching them than Anderson Cooper on CNN. And so this is what we can do is just bypass those clowns until they end up saying no to their masters in the intelligence community. So that's one of the big lessons and big takeaways of the 2001 event. The other big takeaway, and I'm not going to go too far into this, but 4 months later, an event known as 9/11 happened. I'll just let that sit there. But all right. But in every step that we've taken, and this is a warning I'm giving to you today, where we have moved the disclosure ball closer to the goal, something catastrophic has happened to divert the attention of the public. I'll give you an example. Most people don't know this. In 1990, it was in the mid 90s. There was Bill Clinton had this scandal known as the Monica Lewinsky scandal that got him impeached. The day that a major New York paper was going to cover the disclosure projects, then called Project Starlight initiative, with the president and the CIA director, was going to be a headline story. That was the day that Linda Tripp, who worked for the National Security Agency and Army Intelligence, and just happened to befriend Monica Lewinsky, broke the story of the affair Monica Lewinsky was having with the president, and that he had lied about it. That led to his impeachment. This is no coincidence. And that knocked, for years after that, the only story that would be in the media is this sort of nonsense about the president having an affair with an intern. That's all the media would cover. So then a few years later, we do the Disclosure Project. There are hundreds of thousands of people writing to members of Congress and congressmen saying, maybe we should hold a hearing on this. Bang. 9/11 happens. And now, here we are 16 years later. So as soon as we started launching this film, it's crowdfunding. And by the way, everyone listening who's contributed to this film, thank you. We would not have been able to do the book or the film without the support of the public, because I'm not working as a doctor anymore. Personally, my family and I have given up around $12 million in our earnings and income to do this. But what I've told people is that when this began to get legs, you started seeing all kinds of disinformation things appear in the mainstream media about aliens. And then they started trotting out, one of my early students was a guy named Tom DeLonge, a Blink 182. He started talking about evil aliens. It turns out he's being fed disinformation from General McCaskill at the Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. This came out in the WikiLeaks hack of Hillary Clinton's campaign chairman. We start seeing all kinds of other things, like on Gaia TV, disinformation being put out there about alien slave ships and kidnappings and stuff. It's all absolutely scripted out of the CIA. I can tell you this for 100%. Not the people who are saying it. The people who are saying it are just gullible people. But they began to trot out what I knew was the false flag. And one of the things we're talking about in the movie is, how do you get war going? How do you get people on a war footing? You have to create an enemy. You know, Hitler did this, by having the populace begin to hate the Jews. Well, the intelligence community has had a 50, 60-year project of either ridiculing the UFO and ET subject or presenting it as something that'd be a threat. Now, what I say to people is that, look, if you're able to go faster than the speed of light across the distances of interstellar space, there is nothing on this planet you need materially. And you certainly don't need anything biological here, because even in our laboratories, we can clone and do things that are mind-boggling. Never mind a civilization that's 100,000 or 1,000,000 years or more advanced than we are. So why are they here? What's going on? Well, they've been around since the beginning of human history. It's been well proven. In cave drawings 5,000 years old, there are pictures of UFOs with little ETs outside of them. What people don't realize is that when we started dropping atomic bombs in 1945, it was like us hitting a hornet's nest of concern cosmically, where people all over the cosmos went, what in the world's going on this planet? Because I believe that was the turning point in 1945 when they realized that humans had reached the point that we could destroy this entire planet, which perhaps has been in part supported by other civilizations over the millions of years. And that we could also become a threat to them, because within a few years after the hydrogen bomb, we start going into space with Sputnik and then the American space program. So I think that, a lot of people get into this sort of insane paranoia about aliens. I don't even like that word, by the way. I use ET, because you say alien, people think it's someone who's come in from, Mexico. But when you talk about ETs, if you talk about ETs or extraterrestrial biologicals, which is what they're called, ETBs or EBINs, extraterrestrial biological entities, these civilizations are so far advanced from us. There's nothing that is here that they need, but I think they're worried about our hostility. I think they're worried about the direction our civilization has been going for the last 70 years, because for the last 70 some years, we have been increasingly destroying our environment unnecessarily, because these free energy technologies, zero-point energy technologies, have been known for many decades. And we have done things to proliferate not only poisonous weapons of mass destruction, but also huge arsenals, thousands of thermonuclear weapons that, if they were launched, would destroy all life on Earth. So I think that they have a deep concern about that, and I think they see the great promise humanity has, because, most humans, they just want to be happy and live their life and learn and grow and be creative. But you have a handful of sociopaths who actually are running the planet, and they're running the planet into the ground, and the ETs know this. Now, people say, well, why don't they just land on the White House lawn or something and fix it? I said, because that's not their job. It's our job. Humans have to fix this ourselves. And so the Disclosure Project and what we're doing with Unacknowledged, which comes from, by the way, people say, where did you come up with this name? I said, well, it's the first word in a classification of Your Secureteam 10, okay, they have their own terms. They have for projects that are so deep black that nobody knows of them who isn't in them. Those are called unacknowledged special access projects, or USAP. And I learned this in the 90s. There are people on my team who are members of these unacknowledged special access projects. And what that means is that if you're in an unacknowledged special access project, nobody outside of that silo, nobody outside of that compartment or is allowed to know anything about what you're doing, even the president, even the Congress, even the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. And one of my military advisors was in one USAP, unacknowledged special access project, that had $3 billion they were spending. $3 billion. That was one, just one. Now, what the public doesn't understand is that, Donald Rumsfeld, the day before 9/11, said there's $2.3 trillion unaccounted for in the Department of Defense Pentagon budget. Now it's about $500 billion. And where is that money going? The president doesn't know. The Congress doesn't know. It's going into this stuff. It's going into unacknowledged special access projects, which are engaged in all kinds of criminal activities. And I think that this is, in fact, the largest organized crime syndicate in the world that is behind the secrecy of the UFO issue. And for that reason, taking that on is very risky, very difficult. But I concluded the only way to do it, since the leaders wouldn't do it, I said, well, if the people will lead, the leaders will have to follow eventually. So this is our upping the game to get the masses involved as on a grassroots level. And to be honest with you, when I started this effort, I was 34 years old. I'm going to be 62 next month. So, I went from having little infant children to having now 8 grandchildren working in this effort. And I think that we have to hand it off to folks like you and others pretty soon who are going to have to carry the ball. And to be honest with you, this is sort of an attempt to move this out into an audience where the people will understand the subject thoroughly. And the way the book and the film are done, it's written as if someone knows nothing about the subject.
Right. And that's what I love about it.
Give it to someone. Yeah, and it really wasn't, written for someone like you or me who've been studying this for years. It was really written, and the film was created, and the director, Michael Mazzola, and I did this very consciously, is that if you were to pop this, a DVD or a stream of this in a computer for someone who was reasonably open-minded but didn't really know anything about this subject, they'd go, wow, there is some really serious evidence here, because every single person in the book and in the film are military officers, intelligence officers, corporate people, government documents. It's all that material. So, and then the quotes that we use in it are from everyone from other presidents on down, like Jimmy Carter, who saw one of these UFOs and ran on a campaign to end UFO secrecy in 1976, I'm sure before you were born. But he wasn't allowed to, because if you look at the movie, when he asked the outgoing CIA director, who was a member of this cabal, George Bush Sr., about this issue, George Bush Sr., the outgoing CIA director, said, we're not going to tell you anything. And so Jimmy Carter, just like President Clinton, was blocked access. And by the way, George W. Bush really wasn't informed about any of this. Dick Cheney ran all these USAPs for the Bush administration. So what you begin to realize is that we've had a complete breakdown in our constitutional form of government and freedoms, and this is a threat to our national security. I love the quote. One of the quotes that's in the movie and in the book is from the first CIA director. By the way, the CIA was formed right after Roswell happened and that crash. And the CIA grew out of the OSS during World War II. But the first CIA director was an admiral named Roscoe Hillenkoetter. And in early 60s, he wrote a letter to Congress that was in the New York Times that said, and meant several things, that the issue is very serious and that the secrecy about the UFO issue is a threat to the national security. He did not say the UFOs were a threat to the national security. He said the secrecy. Now, Eisenhower, just before him, as Eisenhower was leaving office, said the same thing when he said, beware the military-industrial complex. He did not refer to UFOs per se, but this is what he was talking about. Because it was on Eisenhower's watch between 1953 and 61, before Jack Kennedy became president, that this whole thing went off the rails, that these unacknowledged special access projects came about. And as we say, the rest is history. So, we're 60-some years into a period in our history of our government where we have had just absolutely out of control illegal projects handling this, and they've made a bloody mess of it. But the reason behind it are twofold. They want to keep the technologies away from the public. So you and I are, oh, gee, this is so high tech, we're using the internet. Well, it's being run off a fossil fuel power grid from the 1800s. Your car is 1888 Mercedes internal combustion engine. All right. The jet you fly on is from the 1930s and 40s. Rockets are from Vernon von Braun from 1942, 43. So what are we doing here? I mean, the whole planet is sort of retarded 100 years from where it should be. I mean, we're completely backward. We should have free energy and anti-gravity. All this stuff should have been out around the time I was born.
So does this free energy tech, and I want to touch on a few things. Well, actually, first of all, I'd like to agree with you that I also thought it very strange when Tom DeLonge suddenly appeared on the mainstream media and is now being hailed, as the UFO researcher of the year, of the year, is being given awards, and, people are suddenly emailing me asking about him. And I said, look, I agree. There's a lot of fear mongering.
Yeah, but I don't think he's conscious. Here's how slick the intelligence community is. They will recruit someone like him to reach millennials or X generation folks who is being used. I think Tom has stayed here at my home. I know him very well. I think he's being used by the intelligence community. That has happened over and over again. There are many people that I have introduced to this subject that they then see there's an opportunity to provide disinformation to the public through them, and they start getting fed disinformation. Now people say, well, how are you not being fed disinformation? I said, well, it's been tried, but I have very good methods and sources. So for example, when Richard Doty talks about the U.S. government staging abductions.
I was just about to ask you about him.
Yeah, they just said, oh, he's the only one who said that. I said, no, he's not. He's the only one willing to go on camera saying it. So when I put out something, if you see someone on camera in my book, there are probably 10 or 20 people that don't know each other who have corroborated the same data point, who have corroborated the same information. And that's what I try to stick with. I try to stick with highly corroborated information. And you really have to be careful when you're dealing with the intelligence community, military, because you never know when someone's a Trojan horse trying to bring in false information. So the only way I can do that is to fact check it, number one. I mean, God gave us a brain. We can use it, right? And number two, we have to have multiple points of corroboration. So if I have multiple points of corroboration who from different decades over different careers tell me exactly the same thing, that the intelligence community and unacknowledged projects have been doing things such as mutilations and abductions and staging things because to create fear factor, like the movie Independence Day. So eventually we'll end up in World War III. That'll be interplanetary. If I heard it from one person, I'd say, well, that's bull. If I hear it from 10 people that are independent and don't know each other and are not colluding with each other, I go, there's something here. And then I'll drill down on it. So keep in mind that in the Disclosure Project, we have maybe 100 people on the record, but I have probably at this point more than 1,000 sources in the CIA and Pentagon and different corporations who've given me information over the years. But those other people don't want to go on camera because they're afraid or they don't want the public attention. So what we're left with is sort of a tip of an iceberg. Now, out of those 100 or so witnesses that are military and intelligence and corporate, the book and the movie is only like the tip of the iceberg. So the big challenge for this movie, for the director and for me, was saying, where do we make the cut? Because we have, in my archive, I have thousands of pages of transcripts of these sort of people, thousands of pages of government documents. After I met with the CIA director, I got box loads of documents on this. This is where some of the documents that you see I got. Now, some of them aren't that I've gotten are from sources inside the agency or inside the National Security Agency or some other three-letter agency like the National Reconnaissance Office that aren't declassified. And people say, well, if they're not declassified, it's illegal for you to put them out. I said, no, it's not. And here's why. Anyone listening right now, if you have been or are in a project connecting to this subject, you can come to me and we can put your information out and you cannot be prosecuted. And the reason you can't be prosecuted is that I can prove in a court of law, and I have one of the biggest legal teams in the world that defend our constitutional freedoms, who came to the premiere of Unacknowledged, who was offered to help us. It's a huge group that deals with constitutional freedoms. And we can prove in a court of law that these projects are illegal. And because the projects are illegal, they can enforce the National Security Act against whistleblowers. So anyone listening, who has a document, an object, part of an ET craft, a testimony, you're free to speak with impunity. And the proof of it is that all these military people who've spoken on the record, none of them have been harassed. Not any of them. Not a single one.
That's surprising.
No. Yeah. Well, they can't. Because if that happened, I told them, you report that to me, and we're going to go after whoever does it like you can't believe. Whoever does that is going to be in more trouble than you can imagine. I said, make my day and hit me with a legal case, because then we'll make a real public disclosure of it, because subpoenas are then going to go from my legal team to the head of intelligence for the Joint Chiefs of Staff and the CIA director I briefed and the head of the Defense Intelligence Agency and members of the Senate Intelligence Committee, all of whom I've met with personally and all of whom have been lied to. And so that would prove the illegality, the unconstitutionality of these covert programs.
Right.
And at that point, exposed. So they don't want to create a legal case, trust me. So this is why I tell people, I said, make my day. I hate to sound like Clint Eastwood, but, make my day and bring a legal case against me or one of my witnesses, and you're going to see what happens. Well, because we're standing on very firm legal ground.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of people are wondering, and I've been asked this by viewers, is how is it that Dr. Greer is he's still breathing right now with everything that he has, all the information he knows? It's obvious, and your new film, devastatingly proves that the alien phenomenon is real. What would you say to the viewers out there new to this topic would be the best, I guess your favorite case, or maybe the best single piece of evidence that you can think of that proves that this phenomenon is real? And what would you say to them about deciphering the fear-mongering and the disinformation out there? What are steps they can take to find out the real truth, as you have?
Well, I think there's no one single case. There's so many excellent ones that stand out. In terms of scientific evidence and corroboration, perhaps one of the very best cases would be the Japan Airlines case that's in the movie and more extensively in the book, where a Japanese 747 flying the polar route encountered one of these massive objects that was several times the size of a 747, and the pilot signaled to it and it signaled back, and then it started moving. It was like the shape of a walnut with lights going around it. massive, massive object. And I think this was in 1986 or something like that, during the Reagan years. And the main investigator at the FAA, the third highest ranking person at the FAA, became a whistleblower. And people don't realize that not only did he provide testimony, but we got the report from the pilots, we got the radar, we got the original digital radar tapes. The CIA thought they confiscated them. This man, when he retired, had retained the originals in his office, took them with him, and I now have them. So this is dispositive proof of the object and of the witnesses on the ground at radar stations, in the air with onboard radar, and a high government official confirming it, and confirming how the cover-up happened, where there was a meeting and there were 3 people from the CIA, 3 from the FBI, and 3 from Ronald Reagan's Scientific Advisory Committee, who came to a meeting at the head of the FAA's office where this man presented all the evidence. And they were told, we're confiscating all this evidence. You are never to speak of this again. And this meeting never happened. Well, it turns out this man did speak about it years later as a Disclosure Project witnesses, but also brought with him the originals, because the CIA actually got copies. We got the originals. And I have many cases like that. So when you read the book and you see the rich detail of it and also look at the film, just remember there's a huge story behind every one of these. Another amazing case, which is mentioned very briefly in the book, in the film, is the little ET body. It appears to be extraterrestrial body, the Atacama body that we did the genetic research on at Stanford University. The results of those genetic tests now are showing that it almost certainly is not a mutation of a human. In fact, the chief scientist, Dr. Nolan, said the chances that that is a genetic mutation of a human are infinitesimally small. I'm quoting. Now, I have held that body in my hands. It's a 6-year-old child that fits in the palm of my hand. Well, I have big hands, but even so, size 9 surgical gloves. Anyway, but extra, extra large. But it was interesting because when the film Sirius came out, this chief scientist at Stanford was reluctant to actually go that far because not all the genetic material was in. Now it's all been analyzed, and there's no question at all that this is not human. Now, we can't say it's extraterrestrial, but in all likelihood, it's either a part human, part Earth-based, and part extraterrestrial, or completely extraterrestrial. And it was found in the Atacama Desert, where there are a lot of UFOs been seen going in and out of the mountains there in that part of Chile. It's a really dry desert in Chile. It's the driest place on Earth, and that's where this specimen was found. So that's an amazing case because it's an actual physical body. Another amazing case is the landing of the ET craft at Rendlesham Forest, Bentwaters Air Force Base, that we have numerous official documents on, as well as the British Ministry of Defense, after we did the Disclosure Project, released the secret files that actually showed that there were changes in the soil radiation and composition from where this massive object sat down on the ground. And we have multiple corroborating military people who were on site who have provided us information on that. So, you know, in a way, we have so much evidence that the bigger issue becomes, you know, I always say this film and this book Unacknowledged addresses really 3 big issues. What's the evidence? How is it being kept secret? And that's why unacknowledged special access projects are so key, because most people don't understand. How do you keep something secret? Well, first of all, it's kind of out there in plain sight, but the ongoing operations are all these unacknowledged special access projects that are being run illegally with billions of dollars of our taxpayer money, outrageously. And then the question is, what is the why? I mean, the hardest thing to answer is, why would it be kept secret? I know there are many skeptical people who say, well, this would be a great thing for the public to know. I say, yes, but you're not thinking it through. It'd be cool to know that we're not alone in the universe, but to know that they're actually here and that a covert program has figured out how they operate, One of the most important government documents is from Canada, where this Wilbur Smith document that's in the movie and also in the book. I have the entire document in my book, where it says that it's a top secret document that I understand accidentally got declassified in the Canadian archives. And it states point blank that in the early 1950s, they were looking into how these ET craft operated and were figuring out their propulsion and energy systems. Well, guess what? That was like 1951 or 50. 1954, we had accomplished that. So a year before I was born, we figured out anti-gravity. So I'm going to be 62. To give you an idea, that's 63 years ago in October. This coming October will be 63 years that we have not needed surface roads. We have not needed cars, jets, or rockets.
Mind-blowing.
Okay. It is mind-blowing. So think about it. It's almost like we're Neanderthals crawling around in the dustbin of oil and coal and soot and pollution and poverty, and it's all artificial. This secrecy is killing the planet and destroying millions of lives every day through pollution and poverty. It is unbelievable. And once people understand that, they realize, you know what, we need to do something about this. So that's what induced me to leave my medical career, when I realized that it wasn't just about, oh, well, there's ET out there, how interesting. I realized, holy shit, we have an entire civilization that is going the way of the dinosaur here.
Right.
We're just, we're in the middle of the biggest mass extinction in human history. And since the dinosaurs disappeared 65 million years ago, and it's 100% man-made. And we can fix that. We can reverse that, but we're running out of time. And so that's why I left my medical career. I realized that, in a sense, I could save people one person at a time in the emergency department who've been shot or stabbed or car wrecks or heart attacks. Or we can do something to fix this huge problem for the planet for 7 billion people. So it was a big, hard decision for me and my family to make. And my wife's an angel for putting up with it. But there aren't many doctors' wives who will let you leave your medical career as chairman of emergency medicine and do this stuff. I mean, a few years ago, our tax return. Our tax return a few years ago was $35,000 for a family of 6. So that's the other thing. People have to understand the kind of sacrifice and work it takes to do something like this. There's all these rumors out there. Oh, Greer's getting rich. I said, yeah, right. I said, I'd have 10 or $12 million if I'd kept working as the chairman of emergency medicine at this busy ER. But the problem becomes, what is the average person going to do? What I tell people is that people have got to stop viewing this subject as sort of infotainment and realize we have to launch into activism. What activism is, the first thing you can do is get the book and get the movie, and then the part of the proceeds that'll come to our disclosure effort can then build up an energy lab. Why don't we bring out these technologies ourselves? We don't have the funding.
Right.
So, and people think you're going to do something like this. Look, every week there's a new billion-dollar unicorn company being started in Silicon Valley for some stupid app, to measure your boobs or something. This is something that if we had just a little bit of funding, and by a little bit, I mean in the terms of research and development funding, we could have a laboratory stood up and probably in a year to 2 years have a free energy device out for the public that would get us off oil. Now, you would think that some very wealthy people would want to do that, but they don't want to be put in the crosshairs of funding it by themselves. But 1 million people listening to your show, each going to SeriousDisclosure.com and putting in $5 or $10 in donations, that would do it. And so the question becomes, why isn't that happening? And I think it's because people don't understand that what we're trying to do isn't just disclosing that the ETs are here. We're trying to build the foundation for bringing out the new civilization that can be built on that disclosure.
Right.
That is a big distinction. And that's really what we're trying to do.
Right.
Because, more than half the public already believe that UFOs are real and the government's hiding something. But what I'm trying to do is to explain to the public how it's being kept secret and why. And when people understand the why, then they're going to go, wow, if we could organize ourselves and create a movement that was supported properly with enough research and development, we'd be able to bring these technologies out and just bypass Lockheed Martin,
Right.
and bypass the CIA and bypass the government. And that's something I've been asking for a number of years. I'm hoping that we can launch enough support globally around the film and the book that people then begins to connect the dots. And a lot of the social media things I've been reading and the IMDb reviews, people are saying, wow, this finally connects all these dots.
Right.
Of what is the evidence, how is it being kept secret, why is it being kept secret? And when people get to that part of the movie called the lost century, this lost century of evolution on Earth, they realize, wow, that makes sense. This is why a bunch of sociopathic oligarchs and global elites would want to keep this secret, because goodbye JP Morgan Chase petrodollar banking, goodbye oil. People who are holding trillions of dollars worth of commodities in oil and gas and coal, those all become worthless the instant the truth about this is truly understood. And you know what? We begin a new civilization on Earth. We go into a post-carbon civilization that will be high-tech, no pollution, and no poverty. Average work week will drop to 10 to 15 hours a week, maybe at the most 20. And we'll have a civilization of unbelievable abundance. And based on that justice, economic justice, we may be able to achieve global peace. And at that point, the ETs are going to welcome us to outer space.
Well,
that's how it goes.
It's obvious, I think, to anybody who looks at the evidence that we are being visited. I think that humans, as we are at the moment, are a massive threat to ourselves. And I'd like to ask, do you think we'll see disclosure in your lifetime? And do you think it'll be left up to the government to sort of drip feed us the truth? Or is it going to be left up to activists like you and I to grind it out and just kind of, blow the lid off this thing piece by piece?
No, it's in our hands. And I'll tell you why. I was going to give up on all this in 1994 when myself and other members of my team were being targeted for assassination. And as you probably know, I almost died of metastatic malignant melanoma, and two other members of my team had suspicious electronically induced cancers around the same time. And I had a guy from the CIA come and say, you can't give up, because somebody on the outside, which would be me, needs to do this, because no one on the inside wants to take the risk. And those people who have tried to defect, who are in the ruling committee, like CIA Director Bill Colby, who was an old CIA director who was going to give us one of these free energy devices and funding, about, not a lot, but about $50 million in seed funding to get it out to the world. It would have started a global effort of disseminating the technology. He was assassinated the week that he was to meet with a member of my board, and was found floating down the Potomac River. Now, his family thinks he committed suicide or it was an accident. It was neither. His best friend, a colonel, came to the funeral of one of my best friends who was killed, who was helping me in those days, and said, look, we can't look back. This is in our hands. We're the ones that have to carry this. So the big mistake that people make in the smartphone and internet world is that they live vicariously. They're living passively through a two-dimensional screen. People need to get out there and do the hard work. And I know that sounds terribly anachronistic and old-fashioned, but the truth is that if we come together as a people, we can do it. So the first step, we have to get educated, we have to get organized, we have to get funded, because you're not going to start a high-tech research and development lab with a few $1,000s. You need several tens of millions of dollars to do that. Go ask any scientist or research team. I mean, hell, every little pill you take as a pharmaceutical costs upwards of $1 billion to develop and get through the system. So the government's not going to fund that. The corporations that are feeding off the system aren't going to fund it. We individuals, however, can. So I think it's up to us. I think this is the big experiment in democracy that's happening. Are we going to sit by passively and wait for the government to do it, or are we going to make it happen? Now, when we can reach a certain point, and we're hoping unacknowledged becomes this tipping point, officialdom will have to respond.
Right.
They'll have to, because there'll be too many people say, what the hell is going on? However, at that point, you have to be careful, because that's when they may hit the button and launch the false flag. And the false flag would be like, gee, Saddam Hussein has weapons of mass destruction. Let's spend $1 trillion and kill hundreds of thousands of Iraqis and thousands of our own sons and daughters going into Iraq, when it was totally a hoax.
Right.
Or Vietnam. In my generation, 58,000 Americans killed and millions of Southeast Asians.
Gulf of Tonkin.
You know how that, the Gulf of Tonkin. Most people don't know their history, but we actually staged and hoaxed and exaggerated an attack on our naval vessels in the Gulf of Tonkin, which caused such an outcry in the U.S. population and in Congress that President Johnson was virtually forced to expand exponentially the Vietnam War, which was a catastrophe. So we have to be alert. The public, this book and also the film is sort of like a cosmic Paul Revere warning people, not only is this true, but here's something coming that they're planning. Now, I have personally met with people who will not go on the record. And I will tell you one of the most astonishing things that happened. In 1997, we had a closed briefing for members of Congress in Washington that I headed up and organized. One of the witnesses who was to speak to the members of Congress the following night after we gathered was a man who had worked for multiple agencies, three-letter agencies, senior, who had been part of the what's called false indications and warnings, or false flag operations related to UFOs. Doty in the book, in the movie and in the book, acknowledges its existence, but then backs off and says, I can't talk about that. It's too secret. It's too secret. You can see the panic in his eyes. Now, the way I asked that question was that I used the correct military parlance, language, lexicon. And I said, are you aware of the deceptive indications and warnings related to this issue, which is a false flag? Pop culture would be false flag. Now, I've spent 25 years learning how to do military and intelligence speak on this. And so he knew I knew what I was talking about. But the reason I asked that question was because multiple people in the intelligence community and the military unacknowledged world have told me personally that there is such a plan. And this one man who was at the 1997 briefing said, we can hit a button and we can launch events that everyone on planet Earth will think is an alien attack, like Independence Day. Everyone will think it's alien from the president on down, and we can stampede the world into a collective panic that enables the military to take over the world. And I said, how long has this been operational? He says, I was read into it and was on the committee, the interagency committee coordinating these events in 1974. All right, now that's 43 years ago. I know it has existed actually since the 50s. So the false information that, you know, if you have trillions of dollars at your disposal and these kind of technologies where you're actually manufacturing man-made UFOs, okay, so there are ET ones and there are man-made ones. And nobody, almost no one in the UFO subculture is asking which was which.
Right.
All right, except us. And I'm pointing out to people that the only thing more outrageous than covering up the presence of the ETs is covering up the fact that we have built and have operational these sorts of anti-gravity craft that zip around our skies and go part way out into space, not too far, not as far as the lunatic fringe would claim. And because the ETs won't let us go out very far, because we're viewed as a bunch of savages blowing each other up. And we are, frankly.
So they are in space and they are in control of what we are doing in it.
No, they're not in control. There's sort of a prime directive.
Right.
One of them is you don't interfere with the society too much. The other is that no civilization is allowed to go too far out of its orbit until it becomes peaceful. And if it does, try to, it's tossed back like a bad penny.
Right.
The reason for that is that there are entire planets out there that have never had a war on that planet and don't understand the concept of murder. Now, because we're part monkeys organize into troops that do kill each other. And we're 98% identical to chimpanzees and great apes who do engage in murder. We have this sort of predilection towards resolving big conflicts by killing each other.
Right.
But there are species out there that do not. And so you can see how an unenlightened and uncivilized species like our own that has not yet learned to live in peace and resolve our differences peacefully would be viewed as a threat. And we are. I'm just telling you flat out, that's how we're viewed.
Are we in contact?
Now, they also see the beauty. Yes, we are. Well, my team is, my group is. And as you know, from the CE5 initiative. And that's it. Here's a little sneak preview. The next big film is going to be called Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind.
Wow.
That's the one that'll everyone. Because the most important photograph ever taken in this subject is not of a UFO. It's of a transdimensional interstellar being that visited us from the Andromeda Galaxy that's on our website in Joshua Tree National Park a few years ago, floating right outside the chairs of our circle. It's on our website. Anyone who wants to see it, go see it. SiriusDisclosure.com, SIRIUS disclosure.com. It's this. So, what I tell people is that this is we don't have time today to go into all of this,
right.
But it's going to take full circle. The Disclosure Project and the Zero Point Energy New Energy effort was something that I fell into accidentally. My real passion is interstellar contact and what the technologies are that allow for interstellar communication and interstellar travel. I call it TDIS, Transdimensional Interstellar. So that's going to be really the focus of the next film. This one is something that would bring everyone up to speed so they at least understand the what and the how and the why. Mm-hmm. What the evidence is, how it's kept secret, and why it's kept secret. The next one's going to be, now let's look at what we can really do that's fun. We can bring out these technologies and begin a new civilization. That doesn't answer the larger question. How do we develop the relationship between humans and human consciousness and these extraterrestrial civilizations and their consciousness? And how do we then become an interplanetary civilization? Now, this is a question that should have been asked and answered in the 40s and 50s.
Right.
If we had had wise people and not sociopathic warmongers like Douglas MacArthur running this project, this covert program. There's a quote in the film where it says, the next war will be interplanetary. It was said 4 months after I was born in October of 1955. General Douglas MacArthur stated this as a matter of fact. And that is the game plan they've been playing ever since. And so the UFO subculture, including people like Tom DeLonge and all these people appearing on Gaia TV and what have you, are people who are taking disinformation that is scripted by the intelligence community, designed to scare the shit out of people. Excuse my French, but we're not on broadcast TV here. And that has been designed for one purpose, for people to be afraid of aliens. So I don't like the word alien. It has a spooky title to it. I like the word
Well, have you attempted to try to talk to Mr. DeLonge and these other people on Gaia and let them know what the deal is?
Oh, they absolutely know what our view is. I'm not a shy person.
Right.
For people who want to, hear more of this, if you're going to be at Contact in the Desert in Joshua Tree, California, I'm going to be doing a 2-hour workshop there on May, forget what it is, 20th, 21st. And then we're going to do a 4-hour event out under the stars that night. And all that information is on my website. You might want to put it up for your folks to see. So that's going on in, just a few days, a week and a half. I'm going to address this, in very great detail. We're going to have a screening of Unacknowledged first that morning, Saturday. I don't have a calendar here with me, but it looks like it's Saturday the 20th, and then that at 12:20 on Saturday the 20th, I'm going to do a 2-hour exposition of all of this that will go deeper than the movie goes into how this operates.
Right.
And a lot of these figures that you're asking about will be at that conference, so they can learn or not learn. I don't really. Here's the other thing: I don't care about whether something is popular. I care if something is true.
Right.
Now, sometimes some truths are popular, but there's some very unpopular truths about this. And a lot of people don't like it when I point out the fact that much of the information people find on the internet and in other movies and books on the subject is actually disinformation masquerading as information. Now, most of the people, let me say this in everyone's defense, most of the people who are purveyors of disinformation don't know that they are.
Right.
Because the best disinformation is proffered sincerely. The person sincerely believes what they're saying. And in the case of General McCaskill feeding all this stuff to Tom DeLonge, he thinks McCaskill, I'm sure they were very skilled in psychological techniques, gained his trust, et cetera, and so on. The same is true of people like Bill Tompkin and others. So I think people like that sincerely believe what they're saying. They just don't understand that there has been this 60-some year agenda to create fear, and the fear factor, let's call it this fear factor of all things alien, is the foundation for the big agenda of who do we go out into space with and fight. Because as one of my military advisors said, if peace were to break out on Earth and in space, it'd be a disaster for the military-industrial complex. How are you going to justify trillions of dollars a year being spent if there's nobody to fight?
Right.
There's no big enemies.
And we always need someone to fight.
This is Obama's CIA director publicly stated, Leon Panetta, that we provided a briefing to, that we were spending $110 billion a year chasing 70 al-Qaeda members in the desert in Afghanistan, 7-0. So at a certain point, you have to step back and go, wait a minute, who's benefiting from this nonsense? The military, industrial, intelligence, corporate complex. And it's one of the biggest industries on earth. And keeping this secret benefits their fellow board members at oil, companies and public utilities and coal and what have you. So I tell people that, big money, we're not talking billions, we're talking trillions. Right. Trillions is where it's at, man. And, and no one notices anything that doesn't have the T word in it. And this is the issue that involves trillions of dollars in assets and commodities. And believe me, if the UFO issue gets disclosed honestly, people are going to understand this. And so the question in my mind is that will they set up a false flag diversion about the time the public begins to understand what's going on? This is what we have to be vigilant. All of us, you, me, all of your listeners, to be very vigilant for that. Because look what happened after the National Press Club event in 2001. A few months later, we have 9/11. Right. And there's a member of my team who's passed away, so I can speak of this now, who was the highest ranking scientist at the Naval Research Labs, the great big, it's the biggest defense lab in the country. It's there in Washington. Thomas Edison started it. And this is a man who worked on a lot of these projects and introduced a lot of folks to me. And he was at my home here out near the University of Virginia a few years ago, and he told me about being in Vice President Cheney's office and seeing the plans for 9/11 prior to its happening. But that if he were told of this, if he were to speak of it, that they would have killed him, his wife, his children, and his grandchildren. So I could not get him to go on the record.
Wow.
But and he has since passed away of prostate cancer. But people need to understand that there's a story behind the story behind the story, and remember that civilizations that are interstellar, there's nothing on this planet they need except our peace and cooperation. And people who want to create fear and a warmongering drumbeat of horrifying images and narratives, they're maybe very sincere in what they're saying, but they're sincerely wrong. And on the other hand, we do know, and we have now testimony from an Air Force intelligence officer, that the intelligence community has in fact staged and hoaxed human events to make them look alien. Now, another big one, and I'll put this is something your listeners want to put this in their pipe and smoke it, as we used to say. And I don't mean pot, I just mean tobacco. I don't care if you do pot either. But here's the deal with that. In, I believe it was the 80s, there was an event called the Cash Landrum crash. Right. All right. So those of you, this is in the book, firsthand, a lot of people don't realize that this Air Force intelligence officer was the principal investigator of that event, the principal for the Air Force. That craft that crashed was, and I want to be clear on this because people are going to mix this up, it was a manned UFO, manned with humans, that had a man-made energy and propulsion energy system in it. But the craft itself was an ET craft that we had captured, the skin of the craft. Mm-hmm. But the propulsion system was, they couldn't get the ET energy propulsion system to work properly, so they put in a man-made one that was nuclear. It had a malfunction and a filtering problem, and it had a breach, and it started spewing. It was crashing. Went over this area, I believe outside Houston, mm-hmm. Texas, and it was spewing radioactive material. And these women and other people were very severely radiated. Now, that was, they were happy for the UFO subculture to think that was an ET craft that crashed. In reality, it was a manned by U.S. Air Force personnel craft that crashed using a man-made energy and propulsion system, but the airform, let's call it, the craft itself, but not the energy system, was apparently of ET origin that they were trying to get to work. And they had malfunction. And that's why when it was going down, it was accompanied by military helicopters, right, as it was going down. Now, those people were never compensated for their injuries. And when they tried to get compensated by the government, this is an unacknowledged project, right, said, no such project exists. We don't owe you anything. So these poor people suffered serious radiation poisoning. And now we have an Air Force insider who was the principal investigator of the crash on the record, on videotape, admitting that the government was liable for that. Wow. All right. Or if there are any lawyers listening, here is a $1 billion injury suit against the government that would blow disclosure wide open, what I've just said. See, everyone has to connect the dots here.
It's an amazing revelation.
It's a huge okay, so the whole movie is chock full of this. The book has 10 times more. Now, I understand 90% of people don't read anymore if it's not 142 characters on Twitter or on BoobTube. I'm sorry, YouTube. Was it BoobTube or YouTube?
It's YouTube.
I'm just kidding. I have my own radio show with my scathing commentary on our culture and our technology. But for people who read, and there are some people who still read, I think it's very important to get the book or the ebook. It's an ebook also, and drill down on these cases because the detail is so rich. And when you begin to meditate or contemplate, what's the implication of what this testimony is? First of all, we do have hybrid craft that we've been working on that are part ET that we've captured and part man-made. We do have man-made UFOs as well that are anti-gravity. We have fully ET craft that we've captured and killed the ETs. They're all in morgues. I have a man on my team who used to be in one of the underground morgues where all these ET bodies are stored, or many of them are stored near Fort Huachuca underground, or Army Intelligence Headquarters in Arizona. But in many cases, there are UFO events that happen that are completely man-made that people take to be alien.
Right.
So now there are other things that are purely ET. But if you don't have this ability to distinguish between the two, if you're not even asking that question, you're going to get fooled 90% of the time.
I think there's an important distinction to be made.
Yeah, it's a huge distinction. And then from there, you begin to realize, wow, if we have these sort of technologies, it is true that they could stage something that to almost everyone would look like a UFO attack. An ET. Well, it would be a UFO because it's unidentified object to most people, but it's not ET. It's man-made. And they could just make this look like a disaster that was alien, when in reality it's being done, organized from an underground base by a bunch of humans used to stampede people with a false flag into World War III. So I think we have to be very careful. And that's really, on the one hand, I tell people this is the choice. This is the title of my presentation at Joshua Tree next weekend on the 21st and 20th. Is our choice is changing the direction we're on and establishing thousands of years of an abundant, peaceful civilization that's interplanetary, or staying on the path we're on now, which is cataclysmic and a disaster. And this is, you know who's going to make that choice? You and me and the public. Because if we're sheeple, if we're these sort of like blind people following all the warmongers and fearmongers, like we blindly stumbled into Iraq, and now we have ISIS, we're going to keep making this mistake. And it's time for the human race to wake up. And that's really, this is a call to action for that to happen.
Well, Doctor, I wish we had more time today, but I want to thank you for coming on Secureteam and being our very first interview. And I want everyone out there to check out Dr. Greer's amazing film, Unacknowledged. Get the book, get the film. I will put all the links to his website and his past films down in the video description. Dr. Greer, I do hope that you will be back with us soon.
Well, thanks. Yeah, let's do it again. After I get back from this trip, we could maybe do it again. You know, the rental of the film will be out May 23rd for people who don't want to have to buy it. So people can, you know, get it on the 23rd through a rental everywhere, iTunes and Vimeo and everywhere else. And I think DirecTV and even things like that. So, and if people would support this effort some, maybe we can get to the next level of ratcheting up disclosure and developing the zero-point energy systems to bring those out so you don't have to buy oil anymore.
I think we all need to work together. And I think for once we need to stop sitting back. We need to get to work and be advocates and really get out there and help and put our money where our mouths are. So thank you, Doctor. It's been a pleasure.
You.
Please come back again.
Thank you. I appreciate your help.
Thank you, sir.
We will. Bye.
Bye-bye.